Cells. They are the basic building blocks that make up all living things, whether simple, single-celled organisms like amoeba or bacteria, or more complex, multicellular organisms like plants and animals, each cell presenting with all of the characteristics of life. Cells also contain vital genetic information that gets passed down from generation to generation or from cell to cell when the cells divide through a process called mitosis. For now, we're going to focus on the structures that make up the cell and the vital functions they perform to keep the cell alive. Let's take a tour through the inside of the cell. The first structure we're going to look at is the cell membrane. All cells have this membrane and it forms the boundary around the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm is the innards of the cell, like the water inside of a water balloon. And the cell membrane in this case is the balloon, keeping the water inside. The cell membrane is semi-permeable, meaning certain substances can move through the membrane while others can't. Now, based on these structural properties of the cell membrane, we can start to understand its function. It forms a boundary around the cell and it allows certain substances through. So the function is to control the movement of substances into and out of the cell. Next, we take a look at the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm is the jelly-like colorless fluid inside of the cell, surrounded by the cell membrane. It contains mostly water and some dissolved substances like sugar and minerals, and also all the other organelles except for the nucleus. So everything inside of the cell membrane minus the nucleus is part of the cytoplasm. Due to this, the cytoplasm has many functions. It stores and transports many substances, and it gives shape to the cell. But most importantly, it is where all of the metabolic reactions of the cell takes place. Metabolic reactions are all the chemical reactions that takes place within the cells of all living organisms like digestion, respiration, and photosynthesis. The nucleus, as mentioned earlier, is not part of the cytoplasm. It is like the brain of the cell and often referred to as the cell's control center. The nucleus is enclosed in a double-layered membrane called the nuclear membrane, with pores that allow substances to be transported between the nucleus and the cytoplasm. Inside the nucleus, we find the nucleolus and the chromatin network. The chromatin network is like the filing system inside of the control center, as it stores all of the important information about the cell, called the hereditary information. This is the information that gets passed down from cell to cell and from generation to generation, and determine everything about an organism. Both the nucleolus and the chromatin network are suspended in a fluid called the nucleoplasm inside of the nucleus. So all of these parts of the nucleus work together to send and receive messages that regulates the activities inside of the cell. And the chromatin stores the hereditary information of the cell. Attached to the nucleus, we usually find the endoplasmic reticulum, or ER for short. The ER has a very distinct folded membrane structure that form flat discs called cisternae that increases the surface area of the organelle. The endoplasmic reticulum is divided into two sections: the rough endoplasmic reticulum, which has a rough texture due to the covering of ribosomes, which look like little balls embedded in the membrane, and the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, which lacks these ribosomes and has a smooth texture as a result. The function of the ER is basically to serve as the manufacturing plant of the cell. Many organic molecules, such as proteins, lipids, and some carbohydrates, are produced with the help of the endoplasmic reticulum. Ribosomes, like these found around the ER, but also in the mitochondria, chloroplasts, and in the cytoplasm, are the main sites of protein synthesis. Synthesis is just a scientific word to describe the process of combining things to make something else, like combining amino acids to make proteins. So ribosomes make all kinds of proteins needed throughout the cell. Our next stop is the Golgi Body. Similar to the endoplasmic reticulum, the Golgi Body has multiple membrane-bound discs called cisternae stacked close together and that works in close relation with the ER. Where the ER mainly produce organic molecules, the Golgi Body collects and distributes them throughout the cell. So it acts as the distribution center of the cell. The substances get packed into vesicles that is pinched off by the Golgi Body and sent to deliver the substances elsewhere, either to another part of the cell or even to be secreted or excreted out of the cell. So far, we've looked at the cell's control center, the nucleus, the cell's manufacturing plant, the ER, and the cell's distribution center, the Golgi Body. Next, we're going to look at the power plant of the cell, the mitochondrion. This is where the energy needed by the cell is generated. Structurally, each mitochondrion has two membranes, an outer layer and an inner layer. The inner layer is folded inwards to create folds called cristae to increase the surface area where the chemical reaction that generates the energy takes place. Which brings us to the function of the mitochondria. As mentioned, the primary function of the mitochondria is to produce energy, and it does so through a series of chemical reactions collectively referred to as respiration. Respiration is the vital process that takes place in the mitochondria of all living cells to make energy using glucose and oxygen as fuel. So far, all of the structures we've looked at is present in all plant and animal cells. But next, we're going to look at structures found only in plant cells. The first of which is the cell wall. The cell wall is a thick, rigid outer layer found only in plant cells. It surrounds the cell membrane and is not considered to be part of the living part of the cell. The primary component of the cell wall is cellulose. The main function of the cell wall is to protect the cell and give it a regular shape, unlike animal cells which are more malleable and irregularly shaped. Additionally, there are two other structures related to the cell wall. Plasmodesmata, which are small openings in the cell wall allowing adjacent cells to be connected via their cytoplasm to exchange substances. And the middle lamella, which is a thin layer of connecting material between the walls of two adjacent cells. From here we go to the vacuole. Vacuoles are most prominent in plant cells, however they are also present in animal cells but are much smaller and mostly associated with plant cells. The vacuoles of plant cells are large, fluid-filled sacs surrounded by a membrane called the tonoplast. The fluid inside of the vacuole is called cell sap and consists mainly of water and other organic compounds. The function of the vacuole varies from cell to cell, but in most cells it stores a lot of substances and aids in digestion and secretion of substances. But one of the most important functions in the plant cell is to maintain turgor pressure. This is the pressure that pushes the cell membrane against the cell wall to keep the cell rigid. Plastids, on the other hand, are exclusively found in plant cells. There are three types of plastids: leucoplasts, which are generally colorless and store starch; chromoplasts, which contain red, orange or yellow pigments and gives color to fruits and aging autumn leaves; and lastly, chloroplasts, which contain green chlorophyll pigments and are responsible for photosynthesis in green leaves. If we take a closer look at chloroplasts, we'll see a double membrane surrounding a bunch of stacked discs called thylakoids, which contain the chlorophyll pigments needed for photosynthesis. These thylakoid stacks are called graina and are suspended in a colorless fluid called stroma, which contains the enzymes that helps with photosynthesis. Ultimately, all these parts work together to facilitate the functioning of the chloroplasts, which use the energy from the sun to make energy-rich food molecules in the form of glucose through the process of photosynthesis. Lastly, we go back to a group of organelles found in most plant and animal cells, but are mostly associated with animal cells. Vesicles are small temporary vacuoles found in the cytoplasm or that gets pinched off by the Golgi body to transport or secrete substances. One special type of vesicle are lysosomes. These vesicles contain digestive enzymes that help to digest food molecules or worn out organelles to clear the cell of waste. So let's quickly recap. All cells are different, depending on their location and function, but all cells have a few basic things in common, like certain organelles. Every cell has a cell membrane that forms the border around the cell and controls what substances may enter and which may not. But plant cells have an extra layer of protection called the cell wall, which makes it more rigid and regularly shaped than animal cells. All plant and animal cells have a nucleus, which is like the control center of the cell and controls the activities of the cell. All cells have a manufacturing plant in the form of the endoplasmic reticulum and a distribution center in the form of the Golgi body, and power stations called mitochondria. However, some organelles are only found in plant cells, like chloroplasts, which help plants make food using energy from the sun through a process called photosynthesis. And other organelles, like vacuoles, feature prominently in plant cells but only form a small bubble called vesicles in animal cells. This is a lot to take in all at once, and it might seem impossible to remember, but try to use this as a tool to build your own map of the cell and make it relatable to you. And remember, this only scratches the surface of what you need to know about cells, but hopefully it helps you to build a bigger picture, so when you sit down to study the individual structures, it makes more sense and you can see how it all eventually fits together. Good luck.